wall. We have so many examples just on our property of those, but they're throughout in the Northeast too. And farmers generally didn't go out and quarry a big stone, stand it on its edge. They just picked up all the stuff that, or a professional wall builder, and just build these nice straight walls out of these rounded type field stones. They're trying to get rid of them. They weren't trying to create more stones unless they needed a doorstep or a gate post or something for a foundation on a
now, hey,
farm
Dennis,
or whatever.
we need to go to break. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. You're listening to Dennis, and we're going to be back and talking about Stonehenge. So go get a cup of Java or something and sit back in an easy chair and relax when you get back.
Driving through Monument Valley on a star-studded sight, trying to find a white spot to rest my soul for the night. The moon was full and glowing, illuminating the desert floor. I saw rocks and sand and cactus from my driver's window door, when suddenly in front of me, like a vision from beyond, an apparition on the roadside appeared and then was gone. Saw something running fast. A primal fear came over me like a nightmare from the past. A werewolf-looking creature.
You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
That is me. Well, it's kind of interesting. 4,000 years old or more at American Stonehenge. We got a great guest tonight. We got Dennis Stone. And Dennis, also, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, Gary, we have a webpage at stonehengeusa.com. And also there's an email address, info@stonehengeusa. And there's a phone number there. And we're on Facebook, Instagram. And, if they want to call us or leave us a message, we certainly get back to everybody we can. So, and we're open every day of the year except for Christmas and Thanksgiving year-round. We just snowshoe in the winter. So we're there pretty much to answer questions all the time.
Okay. Also, my cohort is there. James, are you there?
Yes, I am. And I got a couple good questions whenever he's done.
Yeah, go ahead. Ask a couple questions.
Oh, yeah. I got to ask, Dennis, was there any finding of any ruins of writing, that can relate to Celtics or Templar writing or anything like that, or is the search still on with that?
Yeah, I mean, the search is always on, but they have found, back in the 60s, we found a couple of tablets in that chamber I mentioned that they radiocarbon dated. So that chamber's had quite a bit of information come out of radiocarbon datings and, the shape of the floor plan, trapezoid, core building on the corners, and that's true of a couple other structures too. But 3 tablets came out of it. These stones probably about 1.5 feet across, kind of triangular shaped, and about 1.5 feet tall. And 2 of them were found in 1964 while they were doing some work on that chamber. In 1967, they found one more right near where the entrance would be because the whole thing has collapsed in on itself. And they sat in a building for about 10 years until Dr. Barry Fell came in the mid-1970s. And he studied them. He took them back to his home in Arlington, Massachusetts, because he worked at Harvard University. But the results, he said, was one of them was Iberian Punic. So it's Phoenician that's found in Iberia, Spain, and Portugal because of the style of the letters or the words, I guess. It's an alphabet. The other one was Celtic Ogam, and he said it's Celt-Iberic also. It comes from Spain and Portugal. It matches that most closely to what's found over there. And the other one was Libyan, Libyan. And again, the Libyans from northern Africa, but they were also in Spain too. And he felt it was a melting pot. And there's many, many megalithic sites in Spain and Portugal. They're really magnificent. And I've been to Spain. I haven't been to Portugal though. But he felt that was a melting pot and a launching pad. And because Columbus took off from that area and headed to the Americas from there, but he felt them, thousands of years before that the Phoenicians would have been the ones with their, large ships. They traveled at night. They traveled out of sight of land. They used celestial navigation, and their ships were pretty large. They could hold some of the ships could hold over, 200 tons of cargo. And he felt they made it to the New World, heading towards, I guess, kind of South America or to Central America, and then you get in the currents and you can come into North America. But these are not only found at our site, but they've been found, most of the inscriptions actually are up in Vermont, at the Vermont sites. They have the most inscriptions of anywhere in the Northeast for some reason, Celtic and Phoenician, mostly Celtic up there though. But again, as we were mentioning earlier in the show, they go all the way out to Washington, British Columbia, on the Milk River, and I believe it's in Calgary, has some of these inscriptions, California, and right into Nevada. So they're right across the nation.
I'm sorry. The other thing I want to ask, in your research, or has anybody researched, because I think this would be very good point to validate what's going on, is any Native American lore or literature that would validate them being there? Because I would think that they would have to have coexist somewhere along the line, and I'm sure Native Americans would have some kind of name for them or something like that. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right, yeah, some sort of oral tradition of them or something like that, or record, or because a lot of the Native Americans, I think 90% of them were kind of, because of disease and warfare, a lot of that's kind of lost. But there's a book called Walking People, and the woman has passed away. She lived in California, but she was Iroquois, and her father, I believe it was, taught her 2 ways to repeat her oral tradition going back, according to her, 10,000 years. And she was kind of mystified by part of it because it talks about these stone structures on these hills, and I think she called them the Walking People. They were strange, different people in her book. We have the book at our museum. She's visited our place before, but being in California, she was not aware of the New England or the Northeast stone structures, and they go into New York also, closer to where the Iroquois nation would be, because they would have traveled too. They would have been migratory somewhat. But anyway, when she heard of the New England structures, it all fell into place for her. That. Whoever built these were not her people; they were strange people, unlike them, And it's a book that's like 400 pages. It's a huge book. And also, we have a Native American chief that's from Massachusetts, and he has Orkney Island blood in him. But he also is Native American. And when he visited our site about 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know if I met him actually. I think I was still working at the airline. He got on and did a 45-minute. Videotape, and I watched it. He was supposed to be at one of the lectures that I was at, but he was in Switzerland, so he did it. He did a pre-tape thing, and it was very interesting. And he said that when he walked up our site, he was having breathing problems. He had a headache. He got dizzy, and he got nauseous. And he said it was just an experience for him. He goes, he thought our place was pretty cool. He said, but I probably will never go back there because this is not part of our ancient tradition. This is a different people. Although he had Scottish blood in him, too. That was an interesting whole thing about the Sir Henry Sinclair. He thinks he's kind of related to that whole clan coming over in 1398, because his last name is Jameson, and one of the guys is James Gunn. So it would have been Jameson, I guess it is. And then there's another gentleman further out west. He's a Native American, I believe a chief also. And he talks about some of these, ruins across the North America, and he said that their people, did not build it. Is that people do not respect our oral tradition. We say we did not build it, and then you have some scholars coming and say you guys built this, So we've heard a little bit of it, not much though, Again, most of the Native Americans in this area kind of, were wiped out by hepatitis B or whatever, and I know smallpox in other areas. But so we've heard a little bit about the place being taboo, actually.
Well, I got to ask you a question. Could it have been put and built by a different race of humanoids?
It's possible. Unfortunately, in New England, the soil is very acidic. It eats up bones within about 200 or 300 years. And there are examples of bones that go back a couple thousand years, usually, I think, in peat or certain areas where the bones don't, decay quite as quickly. And so that's one thing we'd love to have, When the first archaeologist dug out some of the chambers, he back in the 30s, and that was the technology, that was the methodology back then. You went in and you took a shovel, you threw the dirt into a sifter, you sifted it, you looked for, artifacts that you could see. They didn't do any flotation, for pollen samples. They didn't look for microscopic particles. But if some of those chambers were used as burial, even if they were cremation, there would be chemical traces, maybe like potassium and calcium and a couple others. They would send the soil to a laboratory and they could analyze what's in it, and they could probably give an idea that, yes, it was a burial, or maybe, no, it was not a burial, But 80 years ago, the chambers are cleaned out very nicely, and that dirt was taken out, sifted, and it's in sift piles today. I suppose we can go back. We just don't know where some of the sift piles came from. So although you might say, yeah, it looks like some chemicals from a human burial, which chamber? And I don't know the cost of these, these tests. But the technology today is pretty good. They can tell. There's one even called protein analysis. So if you have an arrowhead and it has blood in it, in a microfissure, a small crack in it, they can actually extract that as long as it comes out of the ground and it hasn't been exposed. The arrowhead's been sitting in the soil protected. In other words, you take it out, you send it to a laboratory very quick, they extract that. And I guess they can go back 11,000 years. They can tell if it's human, animal, and what type of animal it is.
Oh, wow.
So we do have a big table, the sacrificial table. And that table is about 9 feet by 6 feet. We don't know its purpose, but it certainly could be a table that an animal or human could be on for some reason, whether it was a birthing table, an embalming table, or slaughter table, or sacrificial table. But it looks the whole thing has a big style to it, the way the whole thing is set up with 4 legs. It's next to a chamber called the oracle chamber with a speaking tube. That has a lot of cracks in it, And I asked the archaeologist that was up to Spring, the younger one with a lot of knowledge of this kind of thing, and she said the problem is the table has been exposed to the elements. If it was buried with dirt and we uncovered the table, we might be able to do that. And I'm like, that's too bad, because part of it was buried back up till the 1930s, almost to about halfway up the slab. And Mr. Goodwin, of course, he took the dirt down and found 4 legs supporting the table. He thought it was sitting on the ground, So it's actually a table with 4 legs under it, shaped like a large bell shape with a huge groove that goes around it with a runnel. And below the runnels, a cut out in the bedrock where you could put like a vase or something to collect whatever fluid came off of it.
Interesting on
that. And, so it's, there's technology there, yeah. It's just sometimes they mess it up, some of the early research.
Have you done any ground penetrating with radar to see?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, back in the 90s. We'd like to do more of it, of course, too. Today it's very, very sophisticated. When we had it done, it looks like we actually have one of the companies that manufactures that was right in our neighborhood, and they moved into Salem a few years after, probably in the 2000s, they moved into Salem. Now they're about 20 miles away in a different town, so we kind of lost track of them and they don't come anymore. But they used to come up in the early 90s, and they would bring the equipment up with some of their customers from around the world, and they would demonstrate how the equipment worked. And we had our archaeologists, the same one I mentioned, working with them on some of the projects there. And, they found a few fire pits, and they ran it over a couple features like some of the storm drains and one of the big rocks that I think might have legs under it. A big stone, no matter where it is in the world, with legs, it could be a flat stone or a boulder, would be called dolmen. And the dolmen, they're all over the place, and we're not really sure what a dolmen is. Some people suggest there were burials, but there's not, bones or that material found under every one of them. But we have one rock I think could be a dolmen, and it's got so much dirt that's built up around them. They put the radar on top and said, yeah, this is not sitting on your bedrock. There are rocks underneath it, possibly supporting it. So that's something we'd like to excavate someday. So the radar's pretty cool, and we have one of the monitors from 1995. It's an antique now. They use laptops, the software and the hardware much, much better than it was, when we last used it up there.
Well, I find very interesting this kind of, I don't